You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional love coach and matchmaker. If you haven't lately, go to wedeepen.com, click on that social calendar and check out all the upcoming social and transformational experiences. There are retreats, summits, the biohacking conference. We're hosting where is this retreat? At the Love Boat in Croatia in September 23rd through the 27th. So definitely see, if you scroll down on that calendar, see a lot of Tantra speed dates. But if you look for that icon, the little plane icon or the boat icon, you can see the multi-day experiences. So that's if you're not in Los Angeles, Austin, Texas, some of those markets that we have a lot of things going on. And don't worry, we're going to get to your market soon. So let us know if you're listening, and check out those experiences. I'd love to have you join, because when I do this podcast, what I'm most excited about is getting you together with me and with each other, and growing in person, having experiences, shared experiences together, because bonds build best over time. Also, my guest today, Leah Lamb, is the founder of the Sacred
Storytelling.
School of Sacred Storytelling. Yes. And she has a retreat coming up. And when I say coming up, this is, this podcast is going to release in mid-May, early May. And this retreat is happening right now in 2023. I'm sure there'll be future retreats if you missed this one, but it's a woman's retreat that is an experience of initiation. It's awakening and letting go of anything that is not serving you anymore. And Leah is a genius at storytelling and using storytelling as a way of healing. And I use that word healing. It's healing and activation, and a way of furthering your life and becoming who you want to be. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but like one thing that has been coming through to me is around naming and owning my desires. And even when I'm working one-on-one, or I'm actually in Maryland right now with my father, and he's navigating some things with his personal relationship. And I was like, Dad, direct the scene. What do you want to happen? Direct the scene. So I imagine we're going to get into it today and talk about storytelling, and even how love relates to story, because I have a story that sometimes I feel may be holding me back in love. Not quite sure. Also, when you're at wedeepen.com, you will see there is a link to join the matchmaking database. There's a $25 submission fee to join that. I ask really specific questions about why now, and also what are the 3 benefits of being in relationship with you. I also ask about what growth type transformational experiences have you participated in, and this information, whether you become a private client or whether you're in the database, so I can keep an eye out on you and also know what experiences to invite you to. Those answers to those questions are so important. And maybe this is around even storytelling, because I will use that to intuitively connect people from time to time with each other. So check that link out. Join us in the dating base. I would love to have you. And lastly, before we jump into it, if you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow it. If you're listening in Apple or in Spotify, you can see those buttons. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to do it. So please just take one quick second, give it 5 stars, and I Definitely appreciate that. Okay. So we're going to get into today's conversation. I met Leah just days ago. I had two of our mutual friends, Shira and Anna, had told me about Leah's work. She's in the Topanga area outside of Los Angeles. And I just, when two people tell you, like, check something out, you're like, okay, I'm paying attention. Yes. And what, we pride ourselves on is curating the best in class social and transformational experiences. And when we jumped on the line, I could tell that there is something deep, I'll say, in the wisdom that Leah shares. There was just an innate feeling of like, ooh, I feel like she can be like a teacher to me. Like, what can I learn from this? So welcome to Deepen with Christina. I'm so excited to be working with you and to be beginning this new relationship with you and I.
Thank you, Christina. I mean, I've just been so appreciating your impeccable way of coming into relationship. And I've noticed it just through the beginning of our communications, and the way that you relate is there's so much presence. And even in your invitation for people, that just piece about, how do I hate dating sites. I'm just going to say it. I went on there a long time ago, and there's that feeling I always feel like I had to sell myself. And something about how you just said, what are the benefits of being in a relationship with you? It's like, I can feel the magnetic energy right there. You're changing the story. You're changing the energetic expression that we have in relationship to each other, where it's like, oh, that's over there. Like, does that draw me? It's just a different energetic. I just really appreciate it and appreciate it.
Thank you. I was yesterday, I met up with a friend here in Maryland. He owns two of the yoga studios. And, one of the things I'm always interested, because I think of yoga as a gateway into transformational experiences. And we were talking about dating. He's currently single, and he loves the dating apps. And he says when he goes out with women, he realizes that if he tells them he loves the dating apps, that they withdraw. So he holds back on saying that. And my theory is, well, women are amazing. Like, they're sparkly, like, they're great storytellers. They're fun to be around. Of course, you as a guy would love dating apps.
Right, because they're visual. This is where men and women are very different. I think men have much more, like, their visual stimulus is very activated. So I can see how it is a pleasurable, literally the dopamine is a pleasurable experience, where women were visceral. I don't know if this is real, but I'm just going off with you right now. I'm like wondering about those different distinctions. And for me, it's like, there's no pleasure in looking at a bunch of pictures. I mean, there's pleasure in watching a man walk down the beach. Let's get real about that. But in terms of like just staring at pictures, that does not make the dopamine go off, but hearing their story or getting to feel their energetic, it's like, for me, I mean, dating, since we're right in it, I had to flip my story right away in relationship to dating apps, because at first I was like, oh, I hate this. It's a waste of time. I was at the busiest time of my working life in like major media. And yet I also wanted this other part of me met. Like, my masculine was being met in the workplace, or she had to show up in that way. And I desperately wanted my feminine to be met, And I realized that if I treated my dating like my work world, it wasn't going to work. I literally had to flip my story. And so I made it into a game. And I made it into a game where I was like, okay, I can gamify this. First of all, the first narrative that I shifted was, I'm going to the gym. Okay, I go to the gym to stay strong and to stay in the practice of being in relationship to my body and to my strength and to my edges. And so now I'm just going to the dating gym, and I'm going to the gym to work out my relationship edges, and stay in practice and stay attuned. And then I made another game, which is, and it's easy because I'm a storyteller and I love hearing people's stories. Like, it's just everyone is entertainment to me. So it's like, so that my other game was like, no matter what, I'm going to have a great time. I'm going to have fun. And to me, that flipped it from, oh, this could be an experience of rejection, or if someone doesn't like me, which is where I was going into it. We're like, oh, will they like me? To no matter what, and it put me in the driver's seat, maybe too much, because what I found is that I would get all these great stories. It may not be enough of the receptive side, but anyway, it made it so that no matter what, I got to win, my experience of being in connection and being in relationship, and that the result wasn't the game, the process was.
I love that. It's interesting I want to get into story and our relationship story, because, I've been doing this work in the quote unquote dating relationship space or sometimes I like to call it the human connection industry, for about a decade. And in those early phases, I didn't come into it and consider myself an expert of it. I was more of like, I want to participate in dating, and I don't really love the dating app experience. If we're going to, bring all the single people together in this, mobile online space, why don't we do it in person? Why don't we just get them together in real life? And at first I found it, the entrepreneurs really easy. I could get them I was in New York City. I could get entrepreneurs who were like, yes, that makes total sense. Whereas, the kind of the finance people and the PR people were like, oh, that's where, that sounds really desperate. Why would I go to a space with like all the single people? Which kind of had me giggle, because, one of the reasons I didn't want to go into the, the online space was I kind of wanted my identity to more be not like out in the ethers world. I wanted to reserve my own identity and to see who was looking at me or meeting them. Actually, I would want to meet them in person. But I would meet, dating coaches and relationship coaches and, always kind of seeking like their perspectives. And I found that there was just, it seems like so many rules. Like, don't say this, do say this, don't talk too much about your ex. Or if you do talk about your ex, here's a good framing for how you talk about your ex. And, and it was a little bit overwhelming, because I was like, I don't know, I kind of just want to be me. like this is now, we want to kind of step into or move from the heady aspect. It was so heady. Like, if you're thinking of the game and there's all the rules by it, I just wanted to be in the being and the experience of it. Mm-hmm. So when you think about story and you're like on a dating experience, or you're meeting somebody out in the world, like, how do you, I guess from your own internal perspective, like, what do you do? Like, what story do you lead with, or do you share?
Well, I want to speak to something that you were just getting at, which is this really key moment where you're saying, I don't want to be so heady about it. I want to be in the expression of it. I want to be in the aliveness of it, and so to me, that's the distinction between having your ego run the show and having this humble expression of, my life is an expression of an alchemy of life living through me. And when I know what I'm in service to, then all of a sudden this tool of mine, this body, this vessel, all of a sudden can be in a great state of ecstatic expression with spirit. And I feel like that's what happens when we come into connection with another person, and we feel that, that hot expression. And sometimes it's with, someone that we're attracted to romantically, but sometimes it's a creative partner. Sometimes it's a soul partner. Sometimes it's like the best mentor that you ever met. And you're like, oh my God, I'm in love with you. That energetic frequency that's happening in your space. I think we all know how good that feels. And that's what so many of us are yearning for, is that sense of connection. And so to me, when we're just talking about story, I mean, that's what story actually is. And it's in its greatest state. It's a connection of, I'm connected to the earth. And so the earth, the wisdom of this place can speak through me. I'm connected to spirit. and they come into a state of union through my body and are expressed through story. And to me, that's what specifically distinguishes sacred storytelling from something else. And I'm going to come back to your question, but this piece of like, well, I'm supposed to do this, and this, and then I'll have this connection because I've manipulated their brain, and based on what we think men want, and people do the same thing to story. And they'll say, well, if you want to sell your business, or if you want to do something and convince somebody, then use these 6 points. Well, that's not a story. That's a clone. And it looks like a story, and it smells like a story, and it acts like a story, but it's missing the life that you just talked about wanting to experience when you're in relationship to someone else, which is like in the moment, feeling the flow of life flowing through you. And so when you say that, well, what stories do I tell about myself? I would like, the thing about stories is that they'll talk to the person based on what and who they are, and like, we know this because sometimes we'll come around someone and, it's so funny. I've experienced this with someone right now, and someone I care really deeply. And I don't know what happens, but every time I get around this person, all my negative Nancy story comes out. And I'm just like, complain about this and oh, poor this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's put me in the situation where I'm like, the level of mastery that I need to activate, because our two energetics call forth stories at a certain, let's say, frequency, whatever. And I go around this other person and my stories are like singing. It's like, I can talk about the hardest situations, but I'm talking about it from a place of like mastery and meeting the moment. And I'm being initiated and I'm being empowered and I'm being sovereign and I'm making choice and I'm looking at my shadow and I'm integrating. And it's like, life's happening, but I'm meeting it and like it's good. Even when there's struggle, it's good, And so our stories will talk to the people based on where they are, and so again, it takes mastery to be like, well, what's the author? Like, what's the story I want to tell, no matter who's listening? That's another aspect. So in terms of what stories to talk about, I think in my senses, I love that you're doing tantra dating. I love that you're meeting people in terms of, can we breathe together? Can we connect from the deepest of place? And I think that really your first role as a storyteller is a listener. Mm-hmm. And when you're truly listening, then what wants to emerge between you automatically comes up. And that's when you start finding the super random things you have in connection. Like, I can't believe that I told you about Aunt Betty, who had like a red Ford back in 1967. And your uncle has had a red Ford in 1967 too. That's crazy. Like, how do we make that connection? That happens from a place of deep listening, that you trust what wants to emerge between you.
Yeah, there's also, after I asked the question, I kind of laughed at myself, like, what a strange question. That's way to be like, have strategy and be planned. And it's really in that moment of presence because each connection that you have with somebody is so unique and different. And I part of think around like, the idea of vulnerability when Brene Brown first started preaching that nearly around 10 years ago, I kept thinking, oh, this is like, I'll go, when I'm with somebody and I'm dating, I'll tell them about my childhood, like my experiences that were hardships. And then as I more deeply understood the concept, I realized, oh, this is about being myself in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And sharing the experience that I'm having. And one of the kind of my edges in coaching, and something that I really enjoy doing as well, is I'll be working with somebody and they'll tell me about something that they're experiencing relationally. And this doesn't need to be somebody who's single. This is also, I work with people who are in relationship, and they'll, share what's happening and they'll tell me about it and they'll want to know what to do. And I'll role play back to them and pretty much say the same thing that they just said, but in a way that they can say it to the other person. And it's everything they've just said, but it's contexting it with, I'm nervous to share this with you, or the feeling that's actually happening for them. And that, that can even be part of the, in connecting with somebody else from the start. And oftentimes too, it can be around people coming in and they are socializing, but they have, some type of social anxiety. And we all experience that in some way, but specifically, you're out at a social gathering and you see someone that is intriguing to you and you want to connect with them. And I kind of I used this like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like this countdown, like just go say something, whatever comes out of your mouth, just speak it. And that tends to be the thing that, and it could even be like, wow, I saw you from across the room and you look so intriguing. Mm. And then see how they respond. It doesn't necessarily need to be, the story starter. I guess I'll say doesn't need to be so, I guess planned. It's as you're speaking to in the moment. I would love to, hear your thoughts that you have right now, and also hear your story for how you got into this work and how we actually even connected was that there's this retreat coming up. And how did you even get to the space that you're now hosting these amazing retreats in the Greek islands?
Yeah. And like, gosh, where do I begin? Well, my parents conceived me in Africa in a VW bus while driving across the Sahara Desert. I'm not going to really start back there, but it's such a great story, right? My parents were adventurers and they gave me an adventurous spirit. Both of them did. And they still are adventurous, but, I did, my part of my story is that they were traveling. It was right after the Vietnam War, and they came back to the States and they didn't know how to be here. And it was very discombobulating for them. And our country was really torn apart. And there was this very romantic idea of back to the land movement. Both my parents were born and bred in New York City. But there was this very romantic idea of going back to the land. And so they did. And they moved to a farm in Vermont. My dad's a veterinarian. And so I grew up in a farm in Vermont, but we were always outsiders. And if you know New England, not New England now, but especially New England back then, if you were not born and bred with a good 6 or 7 or 8 or 12 generations beneath you from that place, you are not from there. And there was just a sense of you are an outsider. And so it's what is it? Right away, I got to understand the story of belonging. And what is it to be not from a place culturally, but also Jewish in a place where there were 2 Jewish kids in our entire school, So again, this other story of belonging and being an outsider. And so what do you do when you aren't on the inside? Is you find a way to entertain yourself. And I was really lucky. I had a farm, and a lot of space. And I got to spend a lot of time outside. I got to spend a lot of time in nature, and I got to spend a lot of time with my imagination, which, I think kids use their imaginations differently now. It's as much as I don't understand the whole online computerized world, I do see that there's wild imaginative places that are happening there for children. And so, but it was different for me, I think, because having to be so immersed in the natural world at a very young age, where it was more my home than even my parents, because I was born there with that land. Mm-hmm. There was a sense of listening that started coming in, and a sense of connection and companionship with the natural world that I think is a much more normal way for humans in our original birthright and the way that most of us grew up living on this planet. So I think I was given a very unusual start in terms of getting to have that much time alone in nature that really propelled my imagination, my curiosity, my wonderment, and my story making. And I was given this space. So I was really lucky. My parents discovered at a very young age that I had a talent for writing, and they supported that. And my mom put me into theater classes. And I came across one of the first initiations of my life when my best friend committed suicide in high school. Mm. I didn't know what to do with that. And there was no education about it. Like there was not the kind of awareness that we have about it now. And everyone was just like, just get back to normal. And I was just like, there is no normal after something like that. And not only that, but I was in a small school. We had a series of over 6 suicides in 4 years. And so there was so big in my realm. And so I went to the place that I knew as sanctuary. I went to the safest place that I knew, which was stories and storytelling. And so I took all my grief and all my confusion and all my upset to the story and listened for the story of Sheila Morris was her name. And I told our story. And I told a story about friendship and love and loss and grief and confusion. And that's where I really learned the responsibility of storytelling, because I wrote it into a play, and that play ended up getting produced by a Young Playwrights Festival. And I got to see it on the stage. And I learned the responsibility of storytelling, that what you put out in the world comes back. It's a boomerang. And so you can think about that. When you put out your vision and your dreams, it can come back. When you put out your fears, it can come back. It's like the whole thing, right? We play this game. And so what I realized in terms of the responsibility is that now there were people coming to me and sharing their grief with me. And I was very young still. And I was like, oh, okay, I understand. This is a very powerful tool. And it comes with a responsibility, especially when you take it and you place it onto a stage. And I was lucky again, like when acting was my passion, and my parents said, don't waste your time and our money on going to college. If all you want to do is study acting, go get yourself into an acting school in New York City. And to them, New York City was no big deal because they were from there. So I did. I went to Neighborhood Playhouse and I got to study with Sandy Meisner in one of his last classes and some amazing other great teachers. And I soon discovered that that was not my place. And I came across then one of my next greatest initiations, which was rejection. And I really got that world was not going to be for me, that I didn't have the skin for it, that I didn't have the drive for it, that something much larger was driving. And there was this braiding that was beginning to happen, which was love of nature and love of the natural world. And then there was this love of social justice, love of equality, love of there's this other thing that was happening, and the arts. And I was beginning to have this understanding that in the world of theater, when we come into communion, just like dating, really, it's like the same energetic happens. Like we're in a state of communion. And now what I would say that I could understand is at the time I was feeling magic. I was like, something's happening. We're building an energetic, like there's something building. And to me, it felt like magic. Like there's something that we're creating in that space together. That's why I hate watching videos of live performances, because they don't ever capture the feeling in the room. They don't feel the energy that we feel when we're in that space, because something is happening where we're being transported into other worlds together. We're time traveling, we're reality bending, we're creature creating, we're doing all these things all through the basic human technology that we have, which is this capacity of listening to each other. And so when we create these other realities, whether it's through a play or through a story, and if I say, okay, let's go down to the bottom of the ocean right now, once upon a time. And we go down to the ocean, and right at the bottom of the ocean, there's this huge snake. And it's like the biggest snake in the entire world. It actually wraps around the entire planet, and it eats its tail with its mouth, right around the entire, bottom of the ocean. There it is. And on top of that snake, there's a great, beautiful tree. It's golden with these apples that shimmer every time the light comes through the surface of the ocean and shines on it. So that's a weird image. I don't know where it just came from, but there it is. In your presence, that comes alive. And so, if you went with me to the bottom of the ocean and saw the great big snake and the shimmering tree and all that, and the light coming through the water, we just location traveled. We reality bended. I don't think you were holding your breath. You were just comfortably there, in this other world where you wouldn't normally live. And what I'm calling magic, Princeton calls neural coupling. And it's where our brains literally beep, 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 beep. The front lobe of my brain started getting super activated as that image became alive. And without the use of VR technology, you created that exact same image in your mind. And that was coming alive through the pulse of my life. Right? There's like our body is for batteries. There's an energetic pulse coming through my heart. And so it's like what my will wants to express, it goes all the way down, like what my sexuality, what my second chakra, what my creativity calls forth, and then is expressed through my will, through my third chakra. Then it comes through my heart and it's given life. And then it comes through my throat and it's given a resonance. And then whenever also comes into communion with you, that will land and resonate in your energetic body. And now we've got magic, right? Living between us. There's got all this energy that's been activated. And I got really curious. I'm like, well, what can we do with that energy? I'm such a Capricorn. It's not okay just to be in the deliciousness of this energetic of, whatever world we create together. I wanted to know what we could do with it. And that ended up taking me into this greater world of working with story as a tool for social change. And so part of my journey took me into working with youth at risk for many years as a wilderness guide and getting a master's in social work. And I did eventually go to college and did experiential education, wilderness leadership. Such a fun way to be a young person in the world, I got to say. And it was really continuing to walk with this greater question with, oh my God, I was born inheriting, to me, one of the heaviest stories I think there is, which is that I've got a race to save the planet. That our planet is at risk. And, Capricorns, we really do take on the weight. And I thought it was up to me to solve the problem. I really did. By the way, I'm not crazy. I was just like, I'll ask a lot of environmentalists. I was like, did you think that you have to do something to like save the world? And a lot of people will be like, yeah, kind of, and now I actually completely changed that. Well, Earth, she's going to be fine. She's going to be fine. She's gone through a lot of change. The question is like, will humanity figure out how to live in balance with her? And so, and can we heal? Can we be part of the healing of the disruption and the disturbance that's happened in the flow of life? And so as my questions changed, how I wanted to live in the world shifted. And so initially I thought, okay, how is that weaving that love of earth, love of social justice, love of communion, love of the arts and that creative expression, and love of earth. I was like, so I ended up working with Al Gore and I ended up producing the Green Channel at his current TV television network. And I thought that was going to be it. Like if I could spread the good word about the earth and the planet and climate change and all that stuff. And I realized that wasn't it. Actually, that I learned there that good people with great intentions can cause great harm if they don't understand the tools that they're working with, and they make the tools of humanity into weapons. And that story is the very first tool that humans, I think, were given, even probably before fire. And that when we come into the expression of story, it actually brings us into the greatest exalted expression of who we can be as humans. It literally teaches us everything we could possibly want or need to know about how to be a great human. And the more I began to come into relationship with story rather than news and information, and while I was working at that television network, we were the first television network to have an online platform, so I could see data in a way that no one else had been able to see data before. We all had good. It was just a moment in time when we could have access that no one had. And I saw that people were not being impacted by information, because in that I thought I just had to give people the information, motivation, activation. No, what I saw was that people were actually much more drawn to stories and storytelling. And to me, that was my ticket out of jail. Where if I thought that I had to go into that industry to have impact and influence, I saw actually where my true heart lives, which is in the realm of story. That's actually where the greatest influence happens in a human's beings, in our brains and our hearts, and how we're generated. And so I just took a very long answer to your question, but all of that ended up leading me into the center of what is story. And so I left a really great career that I'd been working really hard to have. And I, went to the edge of the planet, to the cliff, to the oceans, and I set forth that big prayer. And I think it's a prayer that a lot of us have, which is, show me how to live in these times and bring my purpose alive. Like, how do I be part of the healing and the restoration of this planet? And how do I do it in right livelihood? And how do I do it in a way that I can live in abundance and make money? And by the way, how do I do it and have fun too? So it's like all of these things. And my prayer was answered. And I thought I was going to come up with like the next sustainable business idea. And my prayer was answered through a story. And this great big story came to me. And I realized that it had everything in it that my heart was yearning to meet, in terms of, it was a story about a young girl who was called to by the whales to surface the dream of our future. And its main character is on Earth. She is the doorway to death. I mean, all these animals that are going extinct come through her. And in the ocean, she's the key to the garden of life, where the dream of our future is being protected. And in this story was everything about the climate movement. It was about the sixth mass extinction. It was about the pressure being put on young people that they have to save the world. It was killing the mythos of the power of one and rising the new story of our time, the power of the collective. And I was like, this is a new story, which I think oftentimes the new stories are really the old stories just coming back into being given breath and life again. They just feel new because they haven't been around for a while, but they're so resonant and they're like so alive. And so in carrying that story, I had to learn all about what a story really, really is. And I studied with some great masterful people that are alive in our times. And, there's Michael Meades and Stephen Jenkins and Carolyn Casey's. And there's so many like beautiful people who are teaching. But really, it was the land and the earth that started to teach me the mysteries of story, and started to really reveal that what I understand, what a true story is, and why I call it the School for Sacred Storytelling. And I distinctly just make that distinction between what is a story and a sacred story, and what is it to be a storyteller and a sacred storyteller, is that, oh no, I'm just going to go all the way out there on a limb with you to the edge of all this. Which is that if we say that this body, you're a yogini, this body, the soul gets to come through it and be expressed through it, right? And that story is the vehicle for spirit. And that spirit lives through us through the stories that we tell. So think about when you tell a story of fear. When we talk about politics, what are you really talking about? Are you talking about vision? Are you talking about collective collaboration? Or you're talking about fear, and so really getting aware of what's the energetic of the spirit that's living through you when you talk your stories. Same thing when you talk about your past. It's like, look, hard things, traumatic things, we're going to be initiated by life. That's life. Mm-hmm. It's a good life, and I there's this wonderful woman named Elle who is one of the I work out with her at the gym, in LA, and she's like hardcore and she's tough and she's like, you got to struggle. And she talks about struggle being a great thing. She's like, you got to struggle. You got to meet your edges and get stronger. And that's where you get stronger. And what she's talking about is productive struggle to move with the intention to move through something, not struggle getting stuck in the conflict of drama. And so I love her because she's one of my great teachers. And I think of that in terms of, yes, that's what we get initiated by life. And when we understand and have that context of health crisis as an initiation, getting rejected from something you really want as an initiation, breaking up and losing your love and having your heart ripped out of you is an initiation. But if we don't have that basic key technology of what every culture has had before us, which is the initiatory process where we have guides and we work with the elements and we can process through. So that which feels like struggle, we understand that that's what makes us stronger when we face it, when we meet it, and when we take our fear and we give it to the fire, and we take our struggle and we give it to the fire, and we go to the waters and we cleanse off the part of us that we don't want to be anymore. I don't want to be the person that blames others for me anymore. I want to be that person that stands on my sovereignty and is grounded in my capacity and takes responsibility for my life and my part in the way that I live in this world. That's who I want to be. So go to the oceans and wash off any part of you that you inherited, or patterns or behaviors that you learned along the way, and say, no, I want to be this person. And so that's what initiation is. And it comes through the way we tell our stories. And so I can tell you about, I can tell you all different kinds of stories that were like, I used to out victim story anybody in the room, and it's because I had some tough things that happened when I was younger. And I learned this honestly. I love that expression, when you learn something honestly. It's like you learn it honestly. And I also learned that I could get a lot of attention if I shared my victim stories. And that's where I was getting my attention, was through that way. And so, look, the things that happened were legit and real. But you never want to repeat the same story over and over and over again, because we now know, we've got so much understanding about the neural pathways in our brain, that it's sort of like a racetrack, and we get stuck in this racetrack and it goes, meow, meow, meow. Well, I don't know about you, but I like to go on big adventures. I want to go up the mountain and then the valley, and let's go through the cool cave. And so we don't want to get stuck in those circular pathways. So you'd never want to tell the story the same way. Because when you tell your story in the same way, it's like taking a drug. They say that the challenge with addiction is that you don't mature in the time that you're taking that drug. And it's sort of like that, because there is a pleasure in telling the same story. Something's happening. Joe Dispenza's talked about this kind of stuff, but like something happens, we get pleasure out of it, but is it a pleasure that's helping you grow? And so what to me a mature story is, and what a wisdom story is, these are one of the things we teach about in the school, is when the bad thing happened, the hard thing happened, the initiation happened, your heart got broken and stomped on, someone betrayed you, blah, if you tell it the same way, you never get to shift and change. But when you come out and when you say, that was who I am then, and I'm different now. And now who I am, looking back on this experience, I've gained wisdom, I've gained insight. Parts of me have gotten to be strengthened. And one of my favorite tricks and really transforming a story, especially around heartbreak, oh my God, the betrayal that I experienced, talk about having my heart broken. And like, it took me years to get over it. I mean, that heartbreak went straight to my core wounding, and it was so hard for me to get out of the racetrack. And this is where I learned this trick. You take that person who your narrative is convinced is the bad guy, is the villain, is unforgivable, blah, 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 all that stuff, all that energy that's going through. And you do what I call the sumo wrestler flip, and you flip them on their back, and you recast them in your story as your master teacher, who on the other side, so there's this human side that you're experiencing, but we're multidimensional beings. Right? And so in our multidimensionality, we're like, I'm part mermaid, part dragon, part all these things, right? Like we're operating in this. Michael Meade says behind this dimension is the mythic dimension. And we can feel these aspects of ourselves. We can feel them, but when we can sense them, but if we don't have a way to name them and express them, we don't get to come into the full embodiment of them. I'm going off on another river. I'm going to come back to this betrayal story because it's fun. So the sumo wrestler flip, and now, we're looking at, okay, well, what if you take this being and you look at them in the mythic dimension on the soul level, and you say, okay, and you recast them as your master teacher who came in service to you and was going to give you an opportunity to meet a great initiation of your life that was going to bring you to the very edges of your capacity, of what you know, of your comfort zone. And in order to get through it, you're going to have to pass some block or barrier, and something in you is going to have to get strengthened. So for me, when my heart got broken open, and I love that. My friend Craig Molina gave me that term. I remember sitting we were day drinking. I'll confess, it was like my heart was so broken. We were in a bar in San Francisco, and I was like, oh, woe is me. Give me another shot of tequila, and he was like, yeah, your heart's not broken. Your heart's broken open. And I was like, oh, just that one little shift in language. And then I started to think about it, right? This muscle, when I go to the gym and I work out, you have to rip your muscles for them to get stronger. You know, and so why would we think that our heart's any different? And like when we are courageous enough to allow it to be ripped open, you know, and that's what happens like every time, especially as adults, like the first time we fall in love, we don't know what could happen. Right. And it's all like, whoa, you know,
So innocent.
Then to fall in love after that takes so much courage because you know that love travels with a gang. You know, love comes with romance and love travels with ecstasy and it comes with play and pleasure. But love also comes with rejection and it plays with betrayal and it plays with jealousy. And like it's got a very big extended family. So you want to come into relationship with love, you're going to have some complex skills and like to navigate all of its team members. You know, and once after you've fallen in love the first time, you know what you're in for. So it takes so much courage to be able to open your heart again, you know, and strengthen that love muscle. But wow, now you're a courageous lover. You know, now you're someone that's got some skills. Now you're someone that knows what a red flag looks like. Now you're someone who has discernment. Now you're someone that knows, well, maybe not everyone gets to go straight into my heart. Now, maybe there's gates that people come through, you know, and so now you have all this more context. So to answer your question, how does this all lead to leading a retreat in Crete? Is that like, you know, the more I got into storytelling and you know, leading classes where I would work with story as a healing modality, and really as connecting, the great thing that I saw that was at the core essence of what was the great disconnect was this regenerative aspect of giving and receiving. And if we can come back into that, and that's in relationship, we do that in relationships. We know when it's broken in relationships, because when we're in a relationship with a narcissist or we're stuck and we're stagnant, we're not able to give what we know somebody wants, or, you know, or we can't receive the love that's there, right? So this like giving and receiving energetic frequency, it also plays out in the earth when like right now we're in this taking cycle, take, you know, and we've lost our knowing of what it is to give and an incredible aspect it is to give. And so when I started to come to the place of, well, this is kind of the source issue on our planet in terms of resources, in terms of relationship, it's all connected. And that I can do my part through storytelling. All of a sudden, story ceremonies started to come. And that initial question of, wait a second, there's an energy that's happening. And I started to understand group field shifting and changing, that we can transform our stories together when we start doing these story ritual performances, events together, which are so crazy fun. And then the School for Sacred Storytelling came online, and that's a big, wonderful thing that comes on that we do online. And then the next progression was bringing back our initiations and the role of story in initiation. So now we're coming back to be in person and do these events together and come into that group field and consciously go through that process of understanding who is it that we were, and consciously saying, who do we want to become? What is our soul begging and pleading for us to become? Why did it come here? You know, and what do we get to shed in the process of becoming that? And, you know, one of my favorite stories that I tell is around a new way of looking at Earth. And what if she's not the great mother? Like, what if she's actually the maiden and she's going through the greatest initiation of her life? And we're here. We are these souls that came to help her through it. And we each agreed to help release one of the great burdens that has been cursed upon humans. And you probably know these curses. You know, some of them might be greed, or some of them might be the critic, or the doubt, or the comparing mind. And perhaps it's just as simple as you being so aware of the power that you have when you consciously release these energetics out of your body, what that does to the collective and what that can do for our entire planet. So that was a long answer.
I love hearing you tell story. This is, you know, in our first call together, I gravitated to how you construct concepts and put them together and even share the essence of who you are. I wrote down a lot of notes as you were speaking. One of them, you know, one of the thoughts that I had was around kind of how sometimes inside of our heads, I think without utilizing story, we become hoarders of lots of thoughts and maybe even realities that aren't really true. I've heard this, this hack around that of speaking away, the story that I'm making up is, and actually beginning to share those, because otherwise, there's the hoarding then happens, and the hoarding not only happens in those stories that we're keeping inside of ourselves, but even in ideas and the things that we think out in the world that could actually benefit if we share them, but we're holding them so close. And it reminds me of, there's this book. I spent the first decade of my career in New York City, and marketing and sales jobs, and at a branding agency was the last stop. And there was this book by Paul Arden, and it was called "It's Not About How Good You Are, It's About How Good You Want to Be." And it's this beautiful book, and there's this one particular page that I'll never forget. And he speaks about how, the people who are like hoarding ideas, and they're, you remember back in school where, there's the person where the test would come around and they put their hand over so you can't see my paper. If it was Spanish, I was definitely looking around to see who would let me see their paper. And he says that, that like give away your ideas, because it's the more that you give them away, the more that you're going to receive, the more that is going to come back to you. And also the ideas that we have in our head are generally ones that are like roaming around in the ethers anyway. So put it out there. I mean, I remember that phase like a decade ago, where all the startup founders in New York City would walk around with our NDAs. And I even know so many people who in the past were like, don't tell anybody this idea. And I think like a decade later, they still haven't told anybody the idea. So the idea has not moved, and it's being hoarded, and it could do something great for people out in the world, but it's sticking inside. And we do that not only inside of our heads, we do that, we've all seen the show Hoarders. It's out in the world, and that can be around money. And the thing is, the more that you give out, the more that you receive in return. And then, with initiation, I have to equate it to a little bit with ownership in Kabbalah. I studied Kabbalah for years, and in Kabbalah, they talk about, everything that you desire is outside of your comfort zone. And almost like there's a moat around, and you have to go through the moat, around the castle with like the alligators and everything. So if you want that, if your desires are gonna have to move towards the uncomfortable. And that uncomfortable can be, a lot of society is, fearful of showing their true self. I used to have a huge fear of public speaking. And I think now I never looked at it in this way, but I went through stages of initiation around that fear to overcome it. So there is, even like you say, when you're back in school, that you went through that experience of rejection. And I have to think of like if our lives, they say, live your lives like it's a movie. I'm here in Maryland, and when I go to states like this, other than, or maybe even, I know I'm going to speak about city, but like Austin, Texas, or, Los Angeles, there's a lot of people who are out living lives. Sometimes when I'm in Maryland, I'll tend to notice a lot of, iPads and being the absorbers of the content that is being created. And when you're out there, like living, there is, whether it's God, the universe, whatever higher power that you want to speak to, there's some type of energetic orchestration that is enabling you to move through. It's creating all the drama that makes life interesting. And I think that life is love. It's the whole journey towards love. So even when we talk about the concept of dating never stops. Like, just because you're in a relationship, you are dating. It's like the idea that, I've solved it. I personally, I recently did an Iboga Aya ceremony. I've done a lot of work with ayahuasca, but it was my first time with Iboga. And And I came out of it and I just felt my whole ceremony was around this like pressure to just solve this area of your life. Like you've been working in dating and relationships for a decade, and I would love to be a mother. So you're 42, just fucking pick the guy and be done with this so you can move on to the next level. And it took, and actually after coming out of this ceremony, I kind of came out of it of just feeling the pressure and the weight, and almost like the medicine told me I'm just going to marry this guy and just be done with this. And then I was still trying to make sense of it. I kind of came to the, conclusion that that nothing needs to make sense. Like shit doesn't have to make sense. And then I had an intuitive reading. And it's interesting. I'm curious to hear what you would say about this, but like, it's almost like intuitives or psychics, whatever you want to label them. I know more, I think that the phrase more that I hear that people would like to be referred to more of it is an intuitive. And really what I see the benefit of them is that they're giving you a new story to try out. Mm-hmm. And the intuitive reading was like, you're going to experience this growth with this person. And then somebody new is going to come along in January of next year. And that more so than the big grand ceremony was just that story of being able to relax in a moment without having to know the end, without having to conclude, without having to figure it out. And this remembrance that our whole existence is one big story, and there's things that I won't know until I leave this planet, until I'm gone. And it makes me think, when I think of love, is that I remember back being in Bali a few years ago, and I traveled to Bali with somebody that I was newly dating in relationship with, and I would meet some people and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so great that you found your soulmate." And I would I'm like, whoa. What? Like, what are we labeling this so quickly? I'm just in an experience right now. And then other people be like, "Oh, that's my twin flame and that's my soulmate." And yes, that actually that can be true for you. I like, even in Kabbalah, they say if you go through a breakup or something, like take the soul of your soulmate and put them in a new mate. And I kind of look forward to, not that I want to rush my life to be the end of my life, but I almost look forward to when I'm 80 or 90 or 100 and being able to look back on my life and be like, "Oh, that was significant. And there's that person, and that must have been the soulmates, or they were the soulmates," and reflect on that experience, because we're really in the mystery of it all. And so it's having comfort in the uncertainty, or what I've heard is have certainty in the uncertainty.
Yeah. I love that piece around, it's like when you listen to Indigenous stories, they have something what Hollywood stories don't have, especially the Western stories. Western stories, we want everything to be all worked out. And at the end, there's a beginning, middle, and an end. And it's all wrapped up in a bow and everything makes sense. But then you go watch a French movie and you're like, "Oh, it breaks the head." It literally, the structure is so different, and they don't always wrap it up so easily. And then when you go look at old Indigenous stories, they have something that we completely lack in all of our stories. They literally have the role of mystery. All different kinds of things will happen in those stories that make no sense, and there's no attempt to explain them. And they're hard to read now because, we're not from the place, we're not from the culture. So it's there's so many things that are being said in the story that we don't literally have the tools to understand. But the role of mystery, I can still get from that. And it's and I love what you're saying. It's and even all these stories, "Oh, well, if I get married, I get to go on to the next level." Isn't that great? I love it.
I know.
And and what is that what does that do to us when we think, oh, we don't get to, evolve, or we don't get to expand into the next expression of ourselves, or the next archetypal expression of ourselves. And I think that's what we kind of yearn to do. It's like, we don't ever want to get stuck as the maiden for our whole lives, because, what happens when you come into, other archetypes, and we could call it wife, we could call it empress, we could call it queen, but there's an aspect of sovereignty, but there's also an aspect of giving back, and it's like, there's an aspect of responsibility. There's an aspect of service, in those archetypes. And those, this, even what you were talking about, is like, don't hoard all your ideas. To me, that's the ultimate dance with the muse, right? Like the muse, like, I love that David Bowie used to put his antenna up, and he said, all I do is put my antenna up, and beep, 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 the ideas, the songs come. And I think of that, like, entrepreneurs, creative storytellers, like, where that inspiration is coming through our courting, which it's like, why stop courting just because you're in a relationship? I'll never forget, like, my first love, I stopped beautifying because I was like, I'm done. Right. It's like, I beautified so I could catch a man, and I caught a man, and now I don't have to do any of that. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the fun for me still. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it's like that nature of courting, and that's a whole other thing on beauty and all that stuff, what we could go spend hours on. But that nature of courting, like, we should be able to court life and flirt with life our entire life through. And that is like the zest, the sparkle of life. It's like when we're in that delicious expression and exchange of ideas, and that whole piece, there's no reason why it should not be there. And so, yeah, when the muse comes and whispers, and it's like, we're all drinking from the same stream. There's so many of us that are carrying similar stories now, getting similar inspirations.
And then I wonder, the courting, it's, I love that you brought that up, because, I recently, I had this hit to set these two people up. And so I reached out to the guy, and he was, he was excited by the time, because he's ending he's in the transition of a current love, and they're having a graceful experience of the tradition of the transition. And he said, it's a beautiful time. It'd be wonderful to connect with her, more of like a human connecting thing, but not necessarily courting. And I guess it's maybe coming from a moment of sensitivity around having the other experience, and not wanting probably to feel as though you're presenting yourself in like a full 100%, I'm available right now in the moment. However, as you were speaking of it, and you said something about like courting life and courting all of our relationships, that it's almost, I don't know, it's an interesting, like, to unpack of what the difference is. If I'm good to go hang out with my best friend or make a new friend, how do I prepare for that experience? I mean, I could be judged for a moment, and I'll take this as like, I came in and I do these podcasts, and having a podcast is, it's quite the task. I mean, to grow a podcast, you have to release an episode weekly, consistently at the same time. And I'm also running a company and have family obligations, and, I have a coaching and private practice as well. And so sometimes maybe coming into this, I think I said, the name of the storytelling school incorrectly for a moment. And there's like a little moment of like, oh my gosh, like, am I not courting and preparing significantly for this connection that feels important to me? So yeah, I guess as I'm unpacking the thought, it even brings me to, I brought up the 4 agreements yesterday. And one of the 4 agreements is always do your best. And so in every moment, it's also seeing that everybody's doing the best that they can until they know how to do better, and then they'll do better. But in that, continuing to date when you're in relationship, or even when you're married, maybe that's even around the continuation to be present with somebody. And that is what courting is. It's like that deep level of presence.
Yeah. I mean, there's some beautiful, like, old ways of viewing courting. And I'm not one of the specialists, but there's some people that really are, and that it's an art, it's a craft form, it's a craft. And like, what little I understand around courting is it's really about tending to the desires of another person. So if I'm going to court somebody, then it's like, oh, I would really want to know what their interests are. What's the favorite color of their flower? Or, what's his favorite car? I don't know. It's like, I'm not speaking to it well enough, because it is like, in the old ways, it's really considered a true art form. But there's other things, like as a storyteller, in terms of how I court life, like I can court this beautiful oak tree. Oh, oak tree. My, how gorgeous you are as you spread your arms out wide. Thank you so much for your roots going deep and wide and holding all of that water and holding me safe and protected in your shade. Oh, oak tree, thank you for bringing all the delight of the squirrels and the birds to my doorstep. And there's a way of honoring and appreciating and valuing. But in the true expression of courting, it also involves eloquence. And as I learned eloquence from Stephen Jenkinson, it's not about being clever or knowing the right thing to say or being, perfect. It's about allowing yourself, again, to have your vessel, your tool played by the muse herself. And so it's about that sweet surrender of having the intention to come and develop relationship while allowing the muse to speak through you. So you have to speak a little slower, breathe a little deeper, and allow the inspiration to come visit.
I love that. So I know we're nearing the end of our conversation. I would love to share a little bit more about what somebody could expect when they head on a retreat with you.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'm also curious about is this idea of healing our love story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So final two topics.
Yes. So we go to Crete. We're meeting on May 19th. That's like around the corner. And, the thing about rites of passage is, like, we all arrive when we're ready. That's just it. You can't force yourself into it. So if perhaps one of you is just like, wow, I am ready, I am ripe and ready. So what we're going to be doing is, in terms of what is a rites of passage retreat, it's really an opportunity to come in deep communion with sisterhood, with yourself in your own personal journey, and with the land. And the way that I work is really working with creativity and that aspect of coming into relationship with life itself and that life force that wants to be expressed through you. So we'll do a combination of working together through fun and play and delight, but we're also using the technology of rites of passage, of really getting at what are the behaviors, what are the parts of yourselves that are ready to be released and let go of. How do we work with the elementals to do that and go into ceremony to do that? Not with medicine. It's a not medicine ceremony, just to be clear. And then how do we engage these practices into rituals? And then who are we becoming? Like, what is our soul calling for? What is the dream that we are? Desire. What do we desire? Desire means of the stars, so our desire is actually the imprint that our astrology is saying, this is what you are made for. So when we really listen to our desires, we're following our soul blueprint. And so we get to that. And then we really you have an opportunity that most of us don't get in everyday life, which is to put into practice that person that we most want to be and be held in witness and sacred witness. And then I've led a lot of retreats, and the thing that people do that I find novices on retreats is they They schedule up every single minute, and they don't give you actual time to rest and to restore and to receive and to integrate all that you're doing. So we'll get to travel slowly along Crete, experience the caves, the waters, the valleys, and deepen in. So that's that, May 19th. And if you're interested, you can email me at info@leahlamb.com, and we'll see if our stars align. And then in terms of love stories, I teach a course called Love Medicine. And it's really about how do we heal our love stories, especially the ones that got us, especially the ones that created some scars and some battle wounds, touched our core woundings. And to me, one of the best ways to be with those, and the ones that kind of drive you a little crazy, where they really get under your skin, is that there's something bigger that's happening. And there's the human experience and there's the soul experience. And if we can't be in relationship to the journey our soul is going through, then we don't always get to harvest the gems of the experience. We don't always get to get strengthened and get access to greater aspects of ourselves. It's like if we don't get the wholeness of the initiation. So, and love is such an initiation, And so when I work with people and their love stories, oftentimes I have a process called myth, magic, and medicine, where we understand what are the stories that you're in. And then we put your story in the human dimension, we put it into the mythic dimension. And we look at how is this playing out through symbol? How is it playing out through metaphor? How is it playing out through archetype? And when we see it like that, all of a sudden, sometimes we get an entirely wildly different perspective. And you're talking about like with intuitives, like they can give you a different story and you can try it on. The trick is not giving them so much power, that they're determining, because we cast spells with our language. But so it's like, when we can do that, we can get the medicine for our soul. And when I feel like when we take our story and we make it bigger than this moment and bigger than this human experience between me and you, but what did our souls come here to do? And what does our alchemy create in each other's presence? What looks like a horror show in the human dimension could be a love story on the soul dimension, and could be calling you out into greater strengths that you've ever had. It could be healing, could be giving you access. Like that betrayal that I had, it ripped through the toughest scar tissue that I had built up. It ripped through the armor that I had spent a lifetime creating. So all of a sudden I was so vulnerable in a way that I never had been before. And I could get access to the core wound that I hadn't had. What a gift that he gave me. And so when I can live in the story of the soul and be like, wow, now my soul has some great, extraordinary material to work with. And now that brings me back into my sovereignty and into my own journey. And what I'm experiencing isn't just about this other person and their actions and how they're playing out their human story. Now I'm in a great, bigger story, and I have more life force to work with. If that makes sense. And I'm now connected to source energy. So
yeah, this makes so much sense. I could even see with the one of the stories that I'm in right now of the role that this person is playing for my own healing and growth, and the archetype. Like I often refer to him as, I was referring to him initially as the Joker, and now I can see he's playing a little bit of I reframed it to the Jester, and. Is it Jester? Is it? Yes.
Sacred Clown.
Yes.
You can do different ways with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. And it's poking me in the right ways for me to really tap more deeply into my desires and what I want, and to speak those, and to also, really, one thing is around wanting to be a mother. And in this connection, him and I, because of this desire, what in my dating experience, I've refused penetration because I know he does not want to have more children. And so that is something, okay, I'm just not going to go there with you. But in this relating with him, because I'm 42, I don't, there's a thing of like, you don't even know if you can have children. Like I've experienced many friends go through, be in the relationships and want to have children. And then they go through this fertility journey, this fertility story. And some come out on the other side without children and some come out with children. And I have not even gotten to have that experience. So I don't even know what my experience would be like. And I recently turned 42. And through this connection, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get my fertility checked.
Yeah.
And now I've just days ago, sat with a fertility expert and more of understand where I'm at. But instead of blindly running around and being like, no to this relationship, yes to this relationship, I have more insights. And through this connection with this other person, he stimulated that inside of me to forward my own story.
And I love what you're talking about too, because it's like what I'm hearing in your story is like clarity around your boundaries, but also like getting the most out of that experience. Like, even though he wasn't on one hand giving you what you wanted, right? On the other hand, he brought you much closer to what you wanted because you engaged the life force that came alive between the two of you. And you decided that this was your story. You're not like, well, if he wants to have kids, maybe we'll have kids. No, you were like, no, this is something that I really want and I want to move forward with it. And I'm so inspired. I have so many friends who have found so many ways to have children when they didn't find the man that they wanted to have children with. And I feel like as a storyteller, wow, like the story of marriage, it's like our generation, like this time we just flipped it all upside down, inside out, because people used to have to get married to survive. It wasn't a choice. Like, women had to get married to survive. And so now that all these women are acting out of choice, it turns out that it's a lot harder to find someone. Like, now that you actually get to choose who you want to be with, turns out that marriage is a different thing. And so I feel like women that don't marry should be celebrated for making a choice to be aligned with their truest desire. What if we change that story rather than like, oh, you're not married? You mean you're being true to yourself? Clap the hands, oh, but you still want to have children. Okay. Like, I have friends who are having men who are friends who have donated their sperm and saying, okay, I'm going to do this journey on my own. I know friends who've gone to other countries and been impregnated, through services, and like gone on that journey. And it's like, I've seen so many women say, this matters to me, and I'm going to not be defined by the storage of marriage in order to have a child, because the role of mother is like apparently more important than the role of wife.
You'll like this story. Okay. So a decade ago, I was doing a crowdfunding campaign for a women-centric brand, Feminine Weapon. My initial thought was we were producing concerts in New York City and gathering women through women's empowerment and transformation. And I thought to build it into a brand like Spiritual Gangster. And so Indiegogo crowdfunding was new at the time. So I threw up an Indiegogo campaign and I had a $50,000 goal. And I, set out to raise funding. And I remember one of my girlfriends who I've known since high school, she was like, Chris, I go to work every day. Why should I give to your crowdfunding campaign? And I remember this particular friend was thinking in my head, like, I've gone to your wedding, your baby shower, your like, your second wedding, your bachelorette party. Like, this is my dream. And so I went to GoDaddy.com and I bought marryyourdreams.com and I redirected my crowdfunding campaign to Marry Your Dreams. And then I threw myself a wedding and I sold tickets to my wedding through my crowdfunding campaign. And I had Zelma Davis from CNC Music Factory come and perform live. Everybody dance now. Dun, 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 and held my wedding in New York City. And I didn't hit my goal. So there was some type of failure, but I raised $27,000, had a bomb wedding. I have an FW engaged to my wedding finger, and I had an awesome wedding. And so that is, our society is so trained to give when people have babies and homes and or new homes and weddings, but not necessarily when someone has a dream. So that is like, there is like a lot of, I think from a societal perspective, like you are celebrated when you have a baby and when you get married. And there's other ways to celebrate people as well.
Well, I don't know about you, but like, first of all, I love that story. I love how you just flipped it, right? You just totally flipped her and you're like, oh, you are going to bring me to my next level of like great expression of my life, claiming your life. Like I remember like the thing that, oh shoot, I just lost the thought because it was, that's what it was. Like so many oftentimes, right, women are honored and valued for having children, being wives, taking care of homes. And these are valuable things that are also not being valued, but it's like, these are key things that we do know how to recognize. And I remember when I first came out on my own as a storyteller and having a storytelling school, I was so ashamed and afraid. And then I had to do marketing. I had to do Facebook ads. And I was like, oh my God. And like, I hated it. And then finally I realized what was happening and why I hated it so much. Because I was I was like, this feels like prostitution. I have to sell myself. And I was coming into all these different, I feel like a whore, like all the language that was coming into me. And I was like, oh my God, this is an initiatory experience that so many women entrepreneurs are going through, where we're actually saying, I am of value. I am of value for who I am, and not being defined by if I am married. I'm not being defined as being valuable or wantable by a husband or a relationship. I'm not being defined by being worthy by having a child. I am valuable. The gifts that come through me that I can give to society are valuable, even if I'm not giving a child. That is an initiation. And that experience of marketing and putting yourself out there is an initiation. And to not sell yourself as a woman through sex in those environments is a whole other, thing. What were you going to say?
Well, it's interesting of thinking of, this women making the choice or humans making the choice. I don't need to necessarily just, say it in a particular gender, but if you think of, so we used to get married to survive. Now we have created a society that we can survive in other ways. And because we haven't seen role modeled to us for the most part, thriving relationships, most people didn't grow up observing a healthy relationship, and the topic is completely neglected in our educational curriculums. And so there's, most people, I know I want to be met. Like I want to be met by somebody else who is growth minded, is doing the work, willing to, doesn't want anything like, I want an extraordinary life. And if I'm not going to be met in that, then I can make do. Like I will find a way to thrive without having the quote unquote achievement of a wedding or a child. And also I see that the work we're doing or the movement that we're making within this lifetime is to redesign and to create a world that actually nurtures the types of relationships that we want. So we're a little bit, I think, the generation that is like, fuck this. Like we've got to recreate so that our future generations can thrive in love.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing also is like this real desire to be in like this mutual expression and in the presence of love and with love. And, my dad gave me the greatest gift. I just turned 40 and all my friends were getting married and having their kids. And I was beginning to feel really out of sorts. And when you come to that age, and if you're not doing what everyone else is doing, your social life also starts to change drastically. And it's a tough transition if you're not and following your peers at the stages that they're going. my dad was visiting, and he came to one of our parties, and he looked around at our community. And I lived in a really wonderfully tight knit community in Berkeley, California, and we'd gone through a lot together. And he looked around, and he was like, Leah, he was like, you don't have a husband. You've got 5 husbands. And what he was seeing was that I was in a community of committed relationships and strong connections and healthy relationships with a lot of different men. And it recalibrated my entire way of how I looked at my life. And I started changing my story from, oh, poor me, you guys all have that, and I don't have that, blah, 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 to, oh yeah, okay, well, actually, I have our husband, this guy who always takes care of my car. I have my house husband who opens every single jar. I had a lover at the time, so that was very, very lovely. And I also had like someone who I was very, very, had a lot of spark in our creativity in terms of the story work that we did. And there was like a lot of connection there. And I was like, I am being met in so many aspects of my life. And when I started like boasting about it to my friends, they would get a little miffy with me, in terms of like, because in some ways I had it all in this really weird way, but it wasn't coming in the package that we're told that all comes in. And it wasn't until I could flip around and be in like, oh, what I have. And another moment when I flipped that, because I was like, well, everyone else has this and I don't, all of a sudden, like this little door opened and I was like, well, wait a second, what do I have that no one else has? And I was like, I can move to Kauai and nothing's going to get in the way of it. And so I did. I went and moved to Kauai for 3 months. And it's like, it's about seeing, wow, there are these windows, and like different times we're going to have different kinds of commitments to things that we want. Those commitments bind us, and they strengthen us. And so commitment is good. I don't think addiction to freedom is a healthy thing, but like, I think that when getting to live the most out of your life, in your life story and your journey, and not get stuck. Like if you're not telling your story, you could easily get stuck playing a role in someone else's story.
Mm-hmm.
And so really like getting the reins on your story creates a pretty gosh darn fun life.
Totally. Oh, well, I think we achieved our goal of having a fun conversation.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you really did. You really did.
So we'll share the link to the retreat in the show notes, and hopefully be sharing your other work through We Deepen as well.
Yeah, and I'll just share one other thing that I do, which is I work with people in their soul stories. So it's this mystic form of, it's an ancient form of mystic divination storytelling. And I discovered it by accident. And then in studying, I discovered Clarissa Piccola Estes talks about this ancient mystic storytellers that blows the soul of people into their face. And I was like, oh, I don't feel like I blow the soul of you into your face, but I do feel like, we all have special gifts and talents. And one of the things that came through me and comes through me is getting to see how people are living in the mythic dimension. And it comes through an individualized ceremony and story and song. And it's so fun. I do them for individuals. I also do them for groups. And then we also have the School for Sacred Storytelling. So if you're in this place where you really want to come into alignment with your own voice and expression, we have the most amazing teachers. I am like so excited to launch our new program in September, so that you can all find out that on leahlamb.com. Amazing.
Thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. And I look forward to participating in it in myself. I'm actually considering, or I've started, I have some pages of writing a book, and I can see how your medicine can support me in my goals as well. So totally appreciate what you're doing in the world. And thank you.
Story priestessing.
Oh, I love that.
Of telling a big story and like all that needs to come through. Yeah, that's story priestessing. Beautiful.
Oh, I want to talk more about that story priestessing. Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of Deepen with Christina. Again, if you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow, give it 5 stars. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to do it. And also, let's be together in person. Come on this retreat. Check out all the other experiences. I mean, Tundra speed dates happening everywhere. So you can definitely participate in that one. And I love you all. Bye for now.